Now, earlier we reported that South Africa was urgently looking into manufacturing vaccines. And of course, we are one of the countries pushing for the patents on vaccines to be waived in the midst of a deadly global pandemic. Well, is it a game changer that the United States is now backing such a waiver at the UN? To discuss, we're joined by Professor Farasat Bokhari from the School of Economics, University of East Anglia. Thank you for joining us tonight, Professor. Firstly, your opinion. There are many arguments as to why it's important to protect intellectual property, but is it time for an exception? Is it time to waive the patents? I think the WHO head has said, for example, if not now, then when?
Yes, thank you for having me on your show, Francis. The issue is, again, the same one as in any time these things come up, but when you do it a one-off or for a public emergency, it does raise the same question that what will you do when there is the next time a similar emergency? So if you waive it now and it sets the precedent, then it goes back to the original argument that will there be enough incentives for manufacturers and researchers or research active firms to invest in these technologies to work towards finding the next cure. That's the usual argument that goes over there. So what can we do over here is we need to think beyond just the patent waivers and start thinking about how do we actually increase the manufacturing of these drugs in other parts of the world without necessarily taking away the incentives, but really making sure that this problem is solved now because this is an urgent situation. We need to have extraordinary measures for it. But it may not be that waiving patent protection is the right measure for it.
Yeah.
We certainly do need extraordinary measures, but we need to think harder about how to achieve those.
Well, aren't there some precedents? Some AIDS drugs were made available in South Africa. Is there a middle ground here where you look at the inequality and maybe say some countries can waive the patent, some can't, or you cut costs so that the companies still make a profit, but not super profits? Is there some sort of compromise here?
There may be, but I think we have to also think about why the production cannot go up. So you give a very good example of the AIDS drugs, and there are other cancer-related drugs that one can also think of, which usually, because of patents, have extremely high prices. And in the AIDS case, there were exemptions made where we said that, okay, these drugs should be made more available, generic production can start, with the restrictions that these same drugs cannot come back, for instance, in the Western world after they're produced over there at a lower price. Same thing is happening, for instance, for hepatitis C related, or for hepatitis C and the production of drugs for that. So the price of curing a hepatitis C patient in the US might be close to 80,000 or something like that dollars. But of course, the same thing can be provided in Pakistan or India for much lower price for close to $1,000. And you don't allow that shipment back. Certainly those can be done. But in the case of COVID, the current problem is not necessarily a price issue. So we need to be careful that we are not solving a problem that is not in need of fixing right now. What we need to fix is why cannot we increase the production? And what do we need to do to make sure that production actually increases? It's not the price that's the hurdle, which is usually the case that we think of, that patents are holding up the price too much.
Yeah.
That's not the case over here so much, in my understanding. It's really other technical know-how and capacity that's lacking, and we need to solve that problem right now.
Well, isn't the patent a problem? South Africa, for example, says it would manufacture the drugs if it could. Is that not the actual situation? Although somebody like Bill Gates says, well, people who claim to have this manufacturing capability couldn't actually manufacture and ramp that up pretty quickly. What's the situation?
My view is the same, that I think the problem is not necessarily right now that people don't have access to the licenses. So the licenses are there. AstraZeneca has also been providing them. So I'm not completely convinced that it is the patents or the lack or patent protections that are preventing firms from coming in. Now, by all means, if that is an additional restraint in there, then we need to look at that as well. and see how we can do it. You could, for instance, think about doing something like what was done for Operation Warp Speed in the US. The Western countries, for instance, can get together and put in a program on the same order of magnitude or perhaps even larger, because this is a much larger problem over here, and say that we're going to put in those systems where we even buy out, for instance, the current patents or any other related intellectual property that's related to it, not just the physical patent itself, but the full technical know-how, so that we can transfer this technology to the emerging economy, so that we can set up manufacturing plants over there, and again do it in a way where you also have assistance from the current originators to do this, to allow for this technology transfer.
Yeah.
Because what we need to do is build the full capacity over there. That may require a little bit of time, but that's what we need to do. Just the patent protection being waived away is not going to be the magic bullet. And you do need, again, leadership from countries like United States, as well as obviously European Union coming along and the French coming along and saying, let's put a larger fund together, let's put the capabilities over there and do a true technology transfer.
Yeah,
and that may require you to go back to the patent originators and buying out some of the technology from them if that's what's needed, if indeed that is the bottleneck. But right now the bottleneck is, in a lot of ways, overall technology transfer and technical know-how.
Okay, that's interesting. I haven't often heard that idea of actually buying out the patents. Professor, it sounds like you're not enamored with the idea, but is it a game changer that the United States is supporting a patent waiver? And is it sort of unequivocal in that, or could it, the US itself, look at some of these alternative possibilities?
I think you're right. I mean, it is a game changer because this is not something the U.S. has supported historically. They've been pretty much, staunch supporters of intellectual property and sort of trying to enforce the TRIPS agreements in other countries as well. So you're absolutely right. It is a game changer in that sense. But my real fear is that it may not be enough in terms of solving the problem now, the problem at hand, which is that we need to increase the production of these drugs in countries like South Africa, in India, and create capabilities in other countries. And while the US stick in going along with this thing may help overcome certain hurdles, it's not going to be the only thing that's needed there.
Yeah.
But yes, it is a good starting point perhaps, but you don't also want to take away the incentives for the future pandemics or finding treatments for the future pandemics. That's why I'm saying if you buy out these things, at least you won't necessarily get rid of any of the incentive structures that are there and be able to solve the current issues more rapidly, hopefully, by getting Pfizer and by getting Moderna and by getting other companies to come along and
Okay, so one interesting possibility, buying out the patents rather than waiving the patents. Isn't it all pretty late in the game anyway? Professor, the clock is ticking. We are talking about huge inequality, global economic inequality that's growing because of the inaccessibility to vaccines in sub-Saharan Africa.
Sorry, I can't hear anything. There's 3 other people speaking in the background as well.
All right, Professor, no worries. We're actually going to wrap it there. It was a quick question at the end. We are running out of time, and that was my basic comment, that we're running out of time to deal with the inequalities that are growing. Thank you very much, Professor Farasat Bokhari from the School of Economics at the University of East Anglia.